So we already have like a few attendees joining us. We've got Bola, Awir, we've got Ali, we've got Nikki and Sally. Hi guys. Just to let you know, we are going to wait. Oh, that's nice. Ali, thanks for the wave. Just to let you know, we're going to wait for a few more minutes for other people to join us, just in case if we've got any sort of like late arrivals. As everybody might know, we are going to, or we do record this already. And so that means that you can actually, oh, hi there, Debbie. That means we can, you can watch the recording afterwards. And I would like to maybe use the opportunity just in the meantime, before we actually start with the talk, and I'm going to hand this over to Ed. I would really quickly like to show you where you can find those talks on our webpage, because I know that we always have maybe one or two people who are attending who have not been participating in any of those talks. Just to let you know, my name is Holger. I'm the director of London Institute of Photography. So my background is in advertising photography, and we set up London Institute of Photography a few years ago. I think now we are in the 6th or the 7th year. So we are a relatively young photography school. And the intention basically behind setting up the school is to provide a truly professional photography training, so for people who are considering a career in photography, and those talks are part of it. So we would like to get our students in touch with the industry, and over the years we have now created an amazing archive of different talks. Just really quickly want to show this to you, if you don't mind. Let me share my screen. So that's our webpage. It's liop.co.uk. And you can see here, like on the slideshow on the first page on the homepage, just the like latest things. For example, our new community platform that might be interesting maybe for a few participants tonight. It's for people. It's going to be an online community app, photography app for people, for photographers who want to break into the professional photography market. It's really interesting. So check it out. It's called The Kropp. And you can, for example, if you go to our webpage, to our homepage, and here you can, for example, you can upload, you can join the waiting list. So submit your name and your email. You can learn a few things about what you can expect from the Kropp itself. It's really quite interesting. It's our new baby, to be honest. We are really excited about this. Good, everyone. So lovely. I'm really excited about this talk. We already had a quick chat, Ed and I, before we went live. I've got a drone myself, and I really love this. I'd really love to hear how you got into drone photography, because it's a completely new type of photography genre. 5 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, there was nothing like drone photography, or maybe it just emerged. Yeah. So I'm really excited to talk about a completely new type of photography genre. I'm going to hand this over to you now, Ed. Lovely to have you here on board. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay, so from a fairly early age, I'm dyslexic. So reading was never a strong thing for me. So visual language always really appealed to me more than words. You know, I think people in generally like the written word, they like text, or they like to look at pictures, illustrations, or photographs. And I was very photographic in that way. You know, I used to love looking at old magazines, old National Geographics, books about the natural world, and I used to love the photographs. They were what used to take me off on a journey more than the words and the text. So the visual language is something that's always really appealed to me, and I've always loved photography. It wasn't actually until later on that it became something of a career. But yeah, so my first, I suppose, introduction into photography in the commercial world was after I left college for the first time, and I volunteered to work on a nature reserve in Oxfordshire. My interest was the natural world. I love plants and animals. That was the thing that I really, really enjoyed being around. And I got my first commissions at this time. So we're talking about the kind of mid to late 90s, when everything was still shot on film and transparency. And the first ever job I got commissioned to do was dormouse radio tracking in Oxfordshire. they wanted to print an article in the Trust magazine, so I was given a pro pack of film and 20 quid and go and tell the story. So that was my first baptism of fire into the world of commercial photography, and I absolutely loved it. I later went on to study the subject of wildlife photography at university in the early 2000s. At the time, there was, I think it was the only place in Europe where you could actually study the subject of wildlife photography. There were photography courses all over the country, but if you wanted to be specific and study the natural world, there was one place to do this at the time, which was Blackpool. So if you'd just like to put up plate 1, this is a good illustration of how I started out in my photography career. This is me on Bass Rock with 65,000 breeding gannets covered in bird poo and stinking, and this was where I was most comfortable doing this kind of thing. And that's really where I wanted my career to take me. But as I'm sure many other wildlife photographers would tell you, it's a pretty niche area to work, and it's very difficult to make enough money to live on. So I actually had to supplement my photography with carpentry work. I'm also a site carpenter. I used to build houses alongside the photography work, and unfortunately for me, there was far more need for my carpentry skills than there was for my photography. So the photography actually ended up taking a bit of a back seat. I made a few quid here and there from stock images and the odd license fee. When someone like WWF wanted to use some of my shots for an ad campaign or something like that, but it wasn't enough money to make a living out of. So yes, I sold my soul and started working in construction. But it was actually quite a useful career move in a sense, because 2022, the construction work I was involved in 10-20 years ago is actually quite useful for a lot of my aerial work I do now, and I'll kind of explain why. So when I had kids and got married, there was a period of time where I just needed to make regular money, and the photography wasn't bringing in the regular cash I needed. So I essentially sold all of my equipment, quit photography altogether, and probably one of the worst decisions I've ever made. So it was a very sad time for me. Something really died inside of me, because I was no longer taking pictures and doing the thing that I was really, really passionate about. But it was actually through construction and an appreciation of architecture and the way a building works that it led me into later commissions, looking at producing portfolio material for architects, but more interestingly, survey work for structural engineers and construction companies wanting to renovate old and listed buildings. So if you go to, if you just throw up plate number, where are we? Plate number 7 would be a good example for this now. So plate number 7, this was one of the most incredible jobs I've ever actually worked on. So this was a huge
plate number 7.
Plate number 7, yeah. So this was a huge fire that took place in a large commercial building just down the road from me in Speedwell. So I think the fire was burning at 2000 degrees. There was a fabricator's downstairs. So lots of oxyacetylene tanks went up in the blaze. It was an incredibly violent and incredibly ferocious fire. And as you can see from this image here, the metal structure, the integrity of the building has been massively compromised through the heat. So a structure like this is big, it's complicated, and it's extremely dangerous. You can't really send personnel into a building like this because it could collapse at any time. It's extremely hazardous, and there are lots of chemicals inside the building which would also be toxic to human health as well. So this is a perfect example of where you can, the two worlds can really gel, and you can use modern technology such as drones and unmanned aircraft to go and survey a building like this and take a look at what the damage is like inside without having to send a person in. If you just like to go to the next plate, which is plate 8. This photograph was taken from inside the structure. So I actually dropped the aircraft down inside so I could monitor and survey what was happening to the steelwork inside and help the structural engineers formulate a plan as to how would be best and safest to dismantle the building. So if you can see at the top of the picture, there's some steels that are immensely heavy, huge in weight, buckling under the sheer heat and pressure of the fire. And it would be extremely dangerous to send somebody into this environment to ascertain what the damage was. So I was able to send the drone in, I could do a fly around, take some video, take some photographs, and then come back out again. But what's interesting is you go to a job like this, you go to a project like this, you've obviously got a job to do. You have to you have to record data for somebody else to make decisions about something. But when you arrive at a building or a job like this, there's incredible beauty to what you're seeing. If you'd like to go to which plate are we on now? I think one of the photographs that I think you took off the website, the top-down view of the cars. I think that will be in the other section of photographs. You can't help but, yeah, that's the one there. You can't help but just be in absolute awe of how amazing everything is around you. You know, that's not a scene you see every day. And I found it really fascinating when I'd finished the structural part of the job to just take some photographs for myself. So, I mean, this isn't necessarily the sort of image I would submit to the client. This is just me, you know, using the visual language to tell a story. And, you know, I find decay, I find rust, I find corrosion really, really fascinating to look at. So for me, this was classic, you know, kid in a sweet shop type scenario where everywhere I looked, there was amazing things for me to photograph. So,
and also, I guess probably like at that time, this type of perspective was something completely new, right? I mean, I think the first time that I remember seeing some drone footage actually was through the first kind of Iraq war, basically. You know, so when I think that was like the first time that this type of footage actually entered, let's say, like the public visual consciousness. And it kind of introduced almost like this kind of godlike view onto a scene. You just had never seen anything like that. For example, I don't know if you know this guy called, what's his name? Thomas van Heijtroef, I think. So he's a Dutch photographer. I
Yeah.
think he does documentaries with, or he used to do documentaries with drones. And what he kind of introduces, and he, you know, some of the events that he photographs are really quite, let's say, particular events, let's say like crashs or accidents or like
Sure.
I don't know, let's say like funerals somehow. And what he introduces basically is this almost like this kind of godlike vision. So you actually do see like the relationship of the different elements that you just normally never see when you're down here. You just have this kind of human view, but when you're right up there, it's almost like this kind of godlike view. Yeah. So I think that is a completely new thing, isn't it? Right?
It is, and but it works. It works two ways. So I've said to many people in the past, it's not until you look down onto something you get the true beauty of it. But it can also be very misleading. A photograph I wanted to take for years and years and years was I wanted to suspend myself from the canopy of an English woodland and take a photograph looking straight down onto the bluebells. I always thought that would be an amazing picture. You know, I dreamed of making that shot for years and years and years. Bluebells are something I've always enjoyed photographing. Very, you know, nothing new, nothing exciting. Everyone's photographed bluebells, but I wanted to shoot them in a different way. So I started digging holes next to bluebells so I could shoot them from below with the camera pointing straight up. I would obviously put everything back afterwards, but one of the shots I really wanted to get was a top-down shot looking down at the bluebells from the canopy's point of view. And when I got my first drone, it was one of the first photographs I made. I was really excited about it. I was like, I can make this shot that I've wanted to do for years. And it was rubbish. It was absolutely terrible, because that you don't get the sheer depth of color and perspective when you look down on bluebells. They disappear. So for you to take a photograph of the bluebells and enjoy their structure, their texture, their color, you have to be low. You have to be at their level, looking through them, to really get that kind of perspective and to get that richness that they're broadcasting to you. Take a photograph looking straight down on them, they disappear. So it was my first kind of like, oh no, that's really disappointing. You know, I've been wanting to make that picture for so long, and it just didn't work out. And it's funny, there have been a few examples like that where I've thought, you know, it'd be so good to photograph something from above, but it just doesn't work. You know, so some things they're so much better from a ground perspective, but yeah, obviously a scene like this, it's just made to be photographed from above. You know, you see the rust, you see the broken glass, you see the shapes of the cars. It's very obvious what it is, but it looks so different when you're standing there next to them. And it's a perfect way of isolating the cars from all other distracting elements of the scene. It's just about the cars. So for me, like I took a few photographs when I was on the ground as well, but none of them came close to this particular image that's up on screen. This is one of my favorite photographs I've ever made. I really love this picture, and it looks good printed big as well. It's quite a nice piece of artwork, that one.
Do you think you really had to relearn photography as a drone photographer? Relearn the perspective?
Absolutely. You totally do. And it's not. I wouldn't say I enjoy taking photographs with a drone. It's a strange experience. I don't feel connected like I do with a camera in my hand. When I've got a camera in my hand, I can hide behind it. I like to put a camera up to my face. I like to isolate all other distraction and just see what is through the viewfinder. And I like to move around. I like to get close. I like to get low. That's how I like to photograph. That's how I feel very, very comfortable. Whereas with a drone, it's a very disconnected experience. You're essentially looking at a screen. I mean, it's mirrorless technology, essentially what we're looking at. But you're looking at a screen with lots of distraction around you, and you're making the capture remotely. And for me, I don't particularly like it. I like the results. I like it when I get the pictures home and I can edit them and have a look at what I've managed to capture. But the actual process of making the photograph, I mean, it's almost like a camera trap. You know, you're not. I like to be there. I like to be there right at that time and close to what I'm photographing. I like to kind of feel a part of it, and you kind of don't with a drone. It's a strange feeling. So
yeah, can I ask the audience, does anyone here has actually made any experience like with drone photography? For example, I do, so I bought like a DJI whatever Mavic Pro something like a few years ago, and it's a really specific experience. I mean, like the first time I flew this thing, I was literally like soaked in sweat. Like, you know, they're very, very powerful machines, and like the fact that you've got this vision, you look up and then you see them and then you're looking down, it's very mind twisting, I think.
It's magical. It's when you're flying over things, it's very entrancing. You get very, very sucked into what you're doing, and this is what I mean about that feeling of being slightly detached from what you're doing and slightly disconnected. When I'm filming and I'm flying, it's almost like I'm watching a film, and you have to remind yourself that you actually need to capture things, and you need to take a picture, because it's very easy to get swept away with the scene. And when you're flying over something really, really beautiful, you get that wow factor, and you don't get it when you're shooting through a regular camera, because you're not moving in the same way. You know, with a drone, you're potentially covering tens of meters very, very quickly, and there's so much to see. It's very, very difficult to isolate the elements that you're wanting to focus on. So it's like you say, I think relearning photography is the best way to kind of describe or to make that analogy for using drones. It's very, very different to when you've got a camera in your hand. So yeah, it's an interesting process.
When we prepared had a chat before the talk today, you were talking a little bit about the relationship between, let's say, like
Can you just stop on this? Yeah. Oh, go back a plate. Yeah, so this was another thing I wanted to talk about with drones. Obviously, when taking photographs through a traditional camera, a conventional camera, there are massive restrictions as to where you can and can't get access to. And I wanted to show you this photograph and the next photograph, because this was a story I read about in a magazine, and I thought, what an interesting story. I've got to go and photograph this. And this was a pair of Dutch barges that were coming up the Severn Estuary, and there was a collision, or I can't remember exactly what the details were, but basically these boats were scuttled, and there was a big explosion and a fire, and they were just kind of dumped in the riverbed. And at extremely low tides, they can be revealed, but they're really far away from the bank where you would be able to take a photograph from. And it's so useful being able to use a drone. So if you just go on to the next plate, which is plate 5, yeah, this one. So this photograph you wouldn't be able to take without a drone. So it's not just about flying high and recording the world from hundreds of feet up into the air. Sometimes you're shooting things from just a couple of feet off the ground, but it gives you access to an environment that's hazardous, it's dangerous, you wouldn't be able to get to on foot. And I found these barges really, really fascinating to photograph, and I couldn't find any other good pictures of them. So I was like, this is a great challenge. This is a really, really useful thing to use a drone for, because you can get access to parts of the land that you just cannot get to on foot. This Severn Estuary is one of the most, it's a really, really treacherous bit of water, and below the water surface is thick silt and mud, which is what makes the water so brown. So you certainly couldn't walk out to it even at low tide. But you can make these pictures in relative safely using modern technology to get cameras where you can't be yourself. So yeah, that's why I wanted to include these photographs in the in tonight's talk.
How about this one here?
This is Burnbeck Pier. So this is just off the coast of Weston-super-Mare, and this was a very old Victorian pier, and it's just fallen into disrepair. It's closed off to the public. You can't get there now. Obviously, you can see why. It's a very dangerous building. But again, I love decay. I love the process of decomposition, and I kind of like places that you're not allowed to go to. So from the beach, I could take off, fly out to the end of this pier, and record all of this information. And I would never be able to get these photographs otherwise. You know, so it's fantastic being able to get access to places and things that you can't get to in a traditional way. So yeah, it opens up so many possibilities for being creative. So yeah, this is a perfect example of, you know, somewhere I couldn't get access to, and again, I got the opportunity to make a photograph that I really enjoyed. You know, I really like this.
I was wondering if you're a big fan of do you know the Canadian photographer Edward Butinsky?
Yeah.
I was actually wondering if you like his work.
Of course, who doesn't? Yeah, I mean his work is quite special. He kind of does what I do, but on a massive scale. And I really enjoy his work looking at the effects of man on the land and the processes we go through to extrapolate precious minerals from the land. You know, so a lot of his quarry stuff is just amazing to look at. This photograph right here was actually for a Banana Republic fashion shoot, where they were shooting at Raglan Castle, and they wanted some video to go with the campaign for an American audience. So this was again another example of where you end up in some really privileged situations as a drone pilot, because this is Raglan Castle just before sunrise. This was taken at maybe 5 o'clock in the morning. So I had to leave Bristol 3:30 in the morning, travel through the night to arrive at this location before the sun came up, so I could get the mist and the atmosphere of the castle, and shoot some video. And whilst I was shooting the video, I took a few stills at the same time. And again, this is a place where you can't fly. You don't have any permission to take off and land from this location. And even though the authorities that own and manage Raglan Castle don't own the airspace above it, they can stop you from taking off and landing on their land. So, you know, normally you wouldn't get the chance to take this photograph. So I felt very, very privileged to have this in my catalogue, because normally you wouldn't get permission to do this. So it's wonderful when you can get a new perspective on things. So this is a castle I've been to, or a ruined castle I've been to many times. I take my kids here to have a look. It's a wonderful place. But of course, it's incredible to see it from above.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about the work for the fashion label? How did it actually look like? What was your job or your involvement? So
obviously fashion shoots, they can be extremely high budget shoots, as you'll know. This campaign was a set of still photographs. The main photographer was Richard Phibbs, on set, on location. And at the same time, they wanted to produce a series of short videos for, commercials for the States, and I think Europe. Banana Republic's not a massive company in the UK. It used to be in the 90s, but not many people have heard of it in the UK now, but they've got a huge following in the States and in the rest of Europe as well. So so I was there to produce the aerials for the advert. So obviously I was just producing, you know, reveals and shots of the models walking through the castle from above, and just getting those perspectives that you wouldn't be able to get from the ground. So it's quite nerve-wracking flying over Louise de Chivigny with a drone, just thinking, God, please don't anything go wrong on this particular shoot, you know. So I had to up my public liability insurance considerably for this particular job.
And did they give you some sort of like I don't know, like a particular brief, or let's say like a
so it was actually a German film crew who were doing the commercial. So I think Richard Phibbs is New York based, but he's obviously from Germany. So I think he's still got a lot of connections in Germany, and because of various rules and regulations, they had to use a UK based pilot. So I got hired for the job. And obviously, I would have a chat with the DP on set who wanted to create the video. So they had a storyboard as to what they wanted the video to look like. So we would discuss the shots first, and then get the footage. But obviously, on a fashion shoot, you very rarely stick to the plan. Things are very fast paced sometimes, and you know, a couple of times it's like, oh, it'd be quite good to get the drone up now. So I was kind of ready to scramble at any time. So there was a couple of locations where it's like, it'd be really nice to get a like a reverse jib shot of the models walking through the castle. Right, let's get the drone up and we'll do it. So you don't really have a lot of time to prepare. So your risk assessment has to be kind of like a live risk assessment. You're kind of making assessments as you go. But I like that term. Yeah, it was quite a stressful job, this one, but it's, yeah, with stress normally comes some interesting work. So yeah, it was quite a nice one to do.
And can we talk a little bit about your equipment? Can I ask what type of drone you use? Like, what did you start with? I mean, back in the days.
So I mean, I got into drones around about the time of the Phantom 4. So it's considered a relic now. You know? So like my first drone was the Phantom 4 Pro, which I still use. You know, it's still a good drone for my kind of day-to-day work. And I mean, for television and film as well, the video quality on it is really good. So, you know, even now, you know, you can still get your work into television using like a Phantom 4 Pro, as long as you know what you're doing. You know, you can get some really good footage from that particular aircraft. I mean, I've actually started flying recently the Mini 3 Pro, which is again another DJI drone, because it's sub 250 and there are fewer hoops to jump through when operating in congested areas. So the rate at which the technology has moved on is really, you know, in the last few years, it's just gone crazy. And the quality of photographs you can get on a sub 250 aircraft now are really, really good. So I would actually prefer to use a lightweight drone in an urban built up area anyway. So that's the aircraft I own. But if I'm doing anything high end for Netflix or something like that, I generally hire equipment in. So for Breaking Boundaries, it was all shot on an Inspire 2 with an interchangeable lens. But I can't really afford to own that equipment, and the trouble is with equipment going out of date, is, you know, you invest tens of thousands of pounds in equipment that isn't going to have a very long shelf life. So I would rather just hire it, which kind of works for me. But the photograph you're showing now is a horrible picture. That there's nothing particularly interesting about this photograph at all, other than the story attached to it. So this is Barton Hill Boxing Club, and the reason this photograph is interesting was I actually took this photograph for the proprietor of the boxing club, and it's the home of the first ever Banksy. So I was lucky enough to work on a documentary about Banksy a few years ago, and I went to various locations in Bristol to tell his story, shooting aerials. And this was the location of the first ever Banksy. So if you look at it's actually a basketball court.
And try to zoom in a bit.
If you look in the far left corner, so if you hover your mouse over the far left corner, just on the inside of the basketball court is the location of the first ever Banksy that was produced, and it's still there now. So not many people know where it is, not many people know about it. But for this particular documentary, they wanted to film. You can barely see it now, you know, weather has worn it down. But yeah, it's just behind the railings where your cursor is. But that is the location of the very first ever Banksy that was produced. So I took this photograph midwinter. Lighting was dreadful. You know, there's nothing nice about the picture, but the proprietor of the boxing club was thrilled. He was like, "Oh, thank you so much. That's wonderful." So that's why I included this picture, just because it, again, just having a drone gives you access to some really interesting places and stories from time to time. So this was beautiful Greenland. This was the location of one of the places we filmed for the Netflix documentary Breaking Boundaries. So huge privilege to be out in Greenland. This was in 2020. So this was when COVID was. We were right in the middle of COVID, and whilst we were on lockdown, I was lucky enough to be traveling through Europe and Greenland, filming for an amazing documentary about climate change. So when we were actually here, we were hugely lucky because Greenland was essentially a COVID-free zone at the time, COVID-free location. We went through our quarantine period and we were allowed in, and yeah, basically had the town of Ilulissat to ourselves. There were no other tourists there at the time, so it's quite incredible to be out in the ice fields just on your own. You know, the silence, the beauty, it was absolutely magnificent. And this was excuse me, this was a really challenging shoot, because obviously it's the largest project I've ever worked on, the biggest budget project I've ever worked on. You know, stakes were high. It was very costly to get out to this location, and you get somewhere like Greenland and you're just like, how the hell do I film this? It's just so magnificent and on a scale we're just not used to. It's just vast, and everywhere you look is amazing and everywhere you look is beautiful. And you just kind of think, oh God, this is a dream to come and film here. But at the same time, like, I don't know how to film here. You know, it's so spectacular. So it's kind of, there was a phrase I heard when I was on this shoot, eat the elephant in small chunks. And I really like that. And it's about just breaking down the narrative, breaking down the storyline, thinking about the individual things that you need to film and you need to photograph, and just tackling the project in very small chunks, because it's quite a daunting place to just turn up and suddenly you've got to start filming stuff. So it was a real incredible experience, one I'll never forget. And it was a huge learning curve. And I think this was the trip that really made me appreciate the skill set required for moving pictures as opposed to still images. I think it's a whole new discipline. And as still photographers, you know, it's very important for us to evolve and adapt. You know, a lot more of us are also shooting video now, shooting film. And it's not just simply a question of hitting the record button. Right now I'm a videographer. It's a very, very different way of thinking about stuff. And I wouldn't go as far as to say I found the transition easy. I mean, on this particular shoot, I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time with the DP, who's also a videographer himself. So he actually also comes from a stills background. So for me, it was really, really invaluable to talk to John about the shots he wanted and making that transition from stills to video, because he found it difficult, and he said a lot of guys going from stills to video find it difficult. And you know, I put myself into that category as well. It's a whole new way of thinking, and I think it's really important for us stills photographers to kind of learn the craft of videography, rather than just assuming it's a question of pressing the record button. So yeah, it was a very useful trip to go on, I must admit.
What kind of tips would you give a young photographer who would like to get into drone photography? Is there anything that you learned at the beginning of your career that you think you wish you would have had known at the very beginning?
Not really, other than it's a business, the same as all other business. A good businessman will do well in their career. A poor businessman won't. I think that the making of pictures is just a small element of being a successful photographer. I think the business side of it is so important. And I'm a poor businessman. I am not in any way a success story. You know, I've missed opportunities. I've not done things I should have done with hindsight to get more work. I think the whole industry is a difficult industry to crack, regardless of what you do. And I think there's, with drones especially, there's this real stigma of, oh, we don't need any more drone pilots. We've got all the drone pilots we need. You know, why bother, sort of thing. And I really hate that attitude. The analogy I always use, it's like if someone young came to me and said, oh, I want to be a musician, it's like me saying, well, don't bother, because all the songs have been written now. You know, there's no point. There's no point. All the songs have been written. Don't bother. And I think it's exactly the same with photographs. And I think people fear competition, and people fear other people doing what you do. People get comfortable. People have got their client base, and they don't necessarily want somebody else to come in and do what they do. I'm the complete opposite. I want to be challenged all the time. I want to see other people's photographs and think, why didn't I take that picture? You know, like, that's amazing. Credit to you for that. You know, so from my point of view, I just think, do the thing you love, do the thing you're passionate and that you care about, and get good at it. Get really, really good at it. You know, that's the important thing. And then find someone who's good at running a business and take advice from them, because that will be really, really useful to you. You know, I think obviously the eye for photography, the skill set needs to be there, the passion, the love, the desire for the visual language, all of that. If that's not there and you're good at business, you'll probably still be okay. But if that's not there, you're never going to be an amazing photographer. So I feel like the photography has to come first, but don't forget the business side of things, because it is really important. It's really important to know how to work clients, know how to work with clients, and be approachable. Be someone that someone else wants to work with. You know, on a film set, there's not really anywhere to hide. And if you're a pain in the ass, no one's going to want to work with you. So you need to be the kind of positive energy that's needed. You need to be the person that solves problems and just gets things done. You know, I think that's really, really important. You know, just having a good mindset is sometimes more important than the quality of work you can produce. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but I really believe that, you know. And, you know, I know people that have not got work with people they've worked for before because they've had a bad attitude, and it's not good. You know, it's just not good for the industry, and it's not good for you as an individual. You know, I think it's so important to be the best person you can be. So that's kind of my advice in a nutshell. Make of that what you will.
Yeah, very good advice. Yeah. Everybody, before we proceed to the Q&As, I just snatched, before the talk, I just snatched a few more images from your commercial section on your webpage, because I was really truly amazed by the quality of your work you were actually able to extract from commissioned jobs. I just really, all of you would just really quickly like to run through those images, and maybe Ed, maybe you can comment on a few images.
Certainly.
About those, about the background, or how they occurred, how they have happened.
So this was a hot tub in a retreat that you could go and stay. Simple as that. And I liked the shapes that were created, and no other photographer had taken this picture before. So this is purely perspective. Nothing clever or interesting about this photograph. It was just another way of advertising what was on offer at this. It was like I used to work for like an alternative retreat company, for, you know, shooting lifestyle shots for their houses. So normally I would do some aerial and I would do some stills at the same time. But yeah, this was just a photograph I kind of liked. I just thought it looked good from above, and it's a slightly different perspective. But nothing particularly intellectual about that picture. This one we've obviously discussed already. This was
seen that.
Yeah, so this wasn't actually a commissioned job. This was just down the road from a really boring structural survey I was doing. But these are some China clay processing plants up in Cornwall, and I use Google Earth a lot to scout for interesting locations, and obviously taking inspiration from the likes of Edward Batinsky and Jan Arthurs Bertrand. I love these kind of places from above. I love the colours, the texture. So this wasn't actually the job I was supposed to be photographing. This was just down the road from it. So it was actually a really boring warehouse where I couldn't be particularly creative, but just up the road, you know, I was blessed with this incredible set of shapes, colors and structure. So I took this photograph. I was here again, this just surveying a solar farm, looking at the condition of the solar panels. You fly up and down them, really boring work. But again, just looking at the texture, the shapes, the form, what an amazing view this is from above. You know, I just think I just thought it was a really beautiful shot. So again, I made the photograph, submitted it to the client, and you know, again, it's you can use it for marketing. You know, it's a nice perspective on something that's not normally photographed this way. So people are intrigued from it straight away. This again was actually I was filming at Royal Portbury Dock, and this is a coal scoop, and again, this wasn't the job I was actually supposed to be photographing, but again, pretty much next to where I was filming was this incredible machine. I love structure, I love machines, you know, even though, you know, this represents so much negativity in terms of it's a coal processing, you know, machine to take coal to power state. You know, there's nothing really positive to say about it, and yet at the same time I love the industrial quality of it. I love the structure, the shape, the engineering that's gone into this incredible machine. And you know, it's huge, this thing. It's absolutely massive when you see it in the flesh, but to photograph it from the air, it tells the full story. It gives you the full picture. You know, it's almost like it's too big to photograph from the ground. So to see it up in the air, it's just, yeah, an amazing feat of engineering.
Do you think submitting those really absolutely gorgeous images kind of on top of the work that you have actually been commissioned for, do you think that gives you a certain edge?
Yes and no. To someone who appreciates the visual language, yes. To someone who doesn't necessarily appreciate the visual language, it makes no difference. You know, they would be happy from, I mean, I'm not the only person doing survey work with a drone. Many people do survey work with a drone, but they don't necessarily view the buildings in the same way I do from an artistic point of view, and they don't necessarily see the beauty in what I see. Like this photograph we're looking at now, it's just Meccano, it's Lego, it's all the stuff we used to create as kids. Its shape, its form. I mean, it's been edited in a slightly artistic way. I wouldn't necessarily submit this to the client this way, but again, it was just a roof survey. It was just a structural survey to see what condition the roof of a building was in, you know, and it's obviously so costly to put up a scaffold and send personnel there. If I can do it from the ground and just send a drone up to ascertain where you know, a water leak is coming from, then great. But no, for me, if I can produce an artistic image at the same time as doing something of commercial value, I always will, you know. So I think, to answer your question, if that person appreciates the visual language, then you're potentially going to get you know, another commission from that client to do something more creative. Or if they just want information, they're probably not going to care. But for me personally, if I get the opportunity to make a photograph, I always will. You know, I will always try and think, what can I take from this job? You know, this job's not a particularly exciting job. They want to know where the roof's leaking. How can I make this fun? How can I make this interesting for the viewer?
It's also my experience from you know, from the advertising photography world. If you're prepared to literally like walk the extra mile, or to go the extra mile, to push this even further, sometimes it does make a difference, sometimes it doesn't, yeah, but you just never know. You always really have to strive really like for the best, and who knows what's going to happen afterwards. I mean, who's going to see those images, and something good's going to come out of it. Is that the same how do you say, like a water processing plant, or
kind of clay,
like
yeah,
the same waterworks? Like the same one at the beginning. How about this one here?
Yeah, so this is a sewage plant. This is this is waste. And again, like, I wouldn't necessarily submit this to the client edited this way, but sometimes I'll look at a picture and I just think, how do I feel about it? It was kind of dark, kind of gloomy, a little bit sort of Batman. So I'll just make a picture from the photo. You know, this wasn't submitted to the client looking like this, because again, they don't necessarily need that information. But I think being creative with your photography is just fun. You know, it's just a nice thing to do. You know, before we used Photoshop and manipulated our images, you know, and pushed colors around, you know, we would choose a film emulsion that we liked for that very reason. You know, I used to like shooting on Velvia because of its rich colors and really sort of contrasty nature. And it's like, oh, that helps me to tell a story over a much warmer Kodak emulsion, for example. So, you know, it's all part of the storytelling process, why we do the things that we do. But yeah, I mean, this was just a you know, just a silly picture really, and I just pushed the colors around because I felt that way inclined. But there's nothing particularly intellectual about it. Sometimes it's just nice to make a photograph for fun.
Amazing. I mean, what I personally really love is that you're able to, you know, through the media, through this new medium of drone photography, are really able to extract absolutely fascinating images for what would other people maybe consider, you know, just a regular commission. And you're really getting into it, and you're really getting all those amazing images out of it. I find it really fascinating. Guys, we have a few more minutes left for some Q&As. Ed and I, we really briefly, before we started the the talk tonight, we talked about, for example, what makes you special, which is something that we talk on the professional photography course, that we talk about a lot, which is ultimately really important aspect, like what you have that the others don't. And very often there can be something maybe that you might personally not maybe consider as being something, I don't know, something that's even worth mentioning. So I'm not talking about you, Ed, but from my experience, some students, for example, they bring something really amazing to the table, like something that they can literally like add to the deal. And they're not necessarily aware of this because, well, it's just part of their biography. Yeah, but if you really think about, okay, what do I actually have? So literally like no experience in your life is lost. Everything would add something really like to your capabilities, and that's absolutely amazing. I think that's such a great example of that. We've got Nick. He says, what exams do you have to fly a drone commercially? Nikki, sorry.
So it's all changed since I did it. So when did I get my 2016 was when I got the opportunity to fly commercial. I had to do 2 days in the classroom, which is kind of theoretical, classroom based learning, and then you do an exam at the end of it, and then you have to do a practical flight test to show that you are competent and safe operating an aircraft in like a built-up area, for example. So the qualification I got at the time was a PfCO, which was a permission for commercial operations, and that's given to you by the CAA, which is the Civil Aviation Authority. So they're actually the guys that own and run the airspace. If you want to fly in UK airspace, it's the CAA that you need to have a relationship with. Lots of people like the National Trust think they own the airspace above that, but they don't. So it's the CAA who actually give you your permission. My permission's now redundant. It's not a qualification you can take. So I think next year I've got to go through my training again to get a CVG, which will allow me to continue doing my work, but under a new qualification. So basically, if you just Google like drone flight school, there are a few big companies out there who will give you all of the current information, and depending on what you want to do commercially, they will explain to you what qualification you will require to do the work that you do. So for certain things, you don't really need a lot, to be honest. If you're flying sub 250 and you just want to fly for fun and not necessarily commercially, there are less hoops to jump through. So it's worth having a look on the Civil Aviation Authority website and looking at a flight school like UAV Hub or Heli Guy, someone like that.
Just to clarify, sub 250 means aircraft that weigh less than 250 grams, correct?
Correct. The CAA have deemed that a safer aircraft to operate. Therefore, there is no minimum separation distance to buildings and people outside of your control. So without going into all the details, it's easier to operate sub 250 than it is heavier than 250. So even though I'm qualified to do certain things in a congested area, I would still rather use a sub 250 because it makes my life easier, and I don't necessarily have to get permissions from the managers of buildings to fly close to their buildings. So it means that the risk assessment and the amount of time involved in getting a shoot to happen is less. So if unless the quality is required, I'm happy to shoot on a small aircraft.
Oh, amazing. That's a really great tip. I think we've got Muqtadir. He asks or comments, hi, great shots. By the way, do you film abroad, and which city is your favorite?
So I have filmed abroad a couple of times. Which city is my favorite? To be honest, I've not filmed that many cities. Stockholm in Sweden was a city I filmed in for Breaking Boundaries. Yeah, to be honest, I've not really done much city work. I mean, Bristol, Cardiff. So yeah, I've not really spent much time operating in cities really, for kind of the reason it's a pain, and it's not necessarily something I'm hugely interested in doing. So yeah, my experience of flying in cities is, I would say, limited really.
All right. So that's the last opportunity for everyone, because I really have to dash off.
Of course you do.
The good. So if no one else has any questions, then I mean, thank you so much. That was really an amazing talk and absolutely fantastic photography ads. I really, really love this. I thought the comment about the sub 250 drones is really, really relevant, because I mean, obviously they seem to be improving the cameras. They seem to be getting better and better.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, if they can fit better and smaller cameras into smaller aircrafts, that seems to be opening up a lot of doors. So
it makes life easier. It makes life easier. I mean, obviously, it depends on the client and it depends on the job. You know, sometimes you need the quality that a small drone can't produce. But you know, honestly, the difference between some of the smaller aircraft, it's your average client wouldn't know. So I mean, put it this way: I've used sub 50 for some paid work recently. No client has mentioned anything. So I think that's testament to the fact that you know the quality's there now.
That really is amazing. Ed, thank you so much. It was really
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
huge pleasure. Really like to have you on.